Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Church Finance and Minister Tax Podcast. My name is Michelle Brown, and I am honored to be your host. We all know why we're here, as the name says it all, so let's get started. Okay, so last week's episode, I talked about the new salary requirements that were going in place effective July 1st, okay? I got lots and lots of questions on this, so I wanted to go over a couple of points. Giving the disclaimer first, I am not providing legal advice here. I am just providing research found on the topic of employment law as it pertains to salaried employees, which in sense pertains to payroll taxes, which taxes is my thing, okay? Not law, but taxes. But anyways, I thought this would be helpful. If this answers some of your questions, then yeehaw, great. That makes me happy. And if not, if you still have further questions, definitely reach out to your local person there that can offer you legal advice if that's what you are looking for, okay? So today we're going to address the specific protections and benefits that state labor laws can offer beyond the minimum standards set by the FLSA, which is the Fair Labor Standards Act for salaried employees, okay? While the FLSA establishes baseline requirements for minimum wage, overtime pay, record keeping, and hiring minors, states do have the authority to enact laws that provide greater protection and benefits to employees. One of the questions I got asked more than once was, we live in, let's say, California. State law says this. How does this apply? How does the new federal law apply to me? Or we live in Georgia. Georgia law says this. How does federal law apply to me? Okay, so that's what we're going to go over. I'm going to use a couple of different states. I'm going to use California just because they're one of the most complicated out there. And then another one I will use is, I think we'll use New York. Okay, so one of the areas that people ask about, in addition to do I have to pay them salary, is they ask about meal and rest breaks. Okay, so there are no federal regulations in regard to meal and rest breaks, except the following, okay? And it's not a federal regulation. It's just rest breaks. It falls under the FLSA. And what the federal regs say is that you have compensated breaks and you have non-compensated breaks. That's it, okay? A compensated break is what they're calling a meal break. It typically lasts 30 minutes or longer and are generally not considered work time, and you don't have to pay them for it, okay? Provided the employee is completely relieved from duty during the break. So at my store, if they work a full 8-hour day, they get a 30-minute break. They have to clock out. And I do not bother them during that 30 minutes. They have the right to leave the store. They can do whatever they want to on that 30 minutes. They're not being paid for it. That is their time. Okay. A paid break is, according to FLSA, is if the employee is not completely relieved from duty and must perform any tasks during the meal break, then you pay for them. Okay. So your meal breaks, you're not paying them if they're completely off the clock. If you ask them to do anything, if you're like, okay, go take your 30-minute break, but answer the phone if it rings, then they're not fully relieved. So you got to pay them for that time. Okay. They also have what they call a rest break. And a rest break is you pay them for it. I always think of my very first job ever was at McDonald's. And we got usually a 10-minute break, and we got paid for it. Okay, we had to scarf down a fish sandwich and French fries in 10 minutes. But a rest break is a short break, usually 20 minutes or less, and they are considered compensable work hours under the FLSA. All right. These breaks must be included in the total hours worked and are subject to overtime regulations. Okay, so basically what the federal regs say for meal breaks is that if they're going to clock out that last at least 30 minutes, they're relieved completely of duty, you don't have to pay them, all right? But if they are taking a 30-minute or more break and they're not completely relieved from duty, you do have to pay them, as well as you pay them for these what they call rest breaks, which are 20 minutes or less. So let's go to California, okay? That's what the federal says. In California, they mandate a 30-minute break for every 5 hours worked and a 10-minute rest break for every 4 hours worked. The FLSA does not require employers to provide meal or rest breaks. It just tells you this is what you pay for, this is what you don't pay for. So in this instance, the state law in California benefits the employees more for the meal and rest breaks. Another one would be paid sick leave. There are no federal regs for paid sick leave, but there are special circumstances such as COVID-19 that did provide guidance under the FFCRA, which was the Family's First Coronavirus Response Act, or the EPSLA, which was the Emergency Paid Sick Leave Act. Okay, those were brought about due to special circumstances. So the federal government, unless there's these special acts, these special circumstances, they don't say anything about paid sick leave, all right? But in New York's paid sick leave law requires employers to provide up to 56 hours of paid sick leave per year, depending on the size of the employer. I don't know many places that provide that many hours of paid sick leave, but in New York, that is the state law. So even though the federal government doesn't have any regulations and no requirements for that, for paid sick leave, the state of New York does. Okay, so, and that's what you need to keep in mind for the whole point of doing this, is that these examples illustrate how state labor laws can actually provide greater protection and benefits for salaried employees compared to the FLSA. Each state may have its own specific laws and regulations that offer additional protections. So it is important that you know what the labor laws are in your states. So just because the federal government increased their salary amount to, X amount of dollars, doesn't mean you've got to look at what yours is, because actually in the state of California, their minimum salary law is higher than the new federal law. So in California, they can't go by the federal law. They've got to go by state law, which is going to be higher, which is, is better for the employees, maybe not so much so for the employer, because they're going to have to pay more. So the point of this whole thing is we've got to learn our labor laws. Okay, yes, we need to keep up with the federal, which is what I'm going to try to help you do when any federal changes come up. And there's another one that's coming up here next month that we're going to talk about here soon. But you also have to keep in mind your state law. If your state provides additional protection above what the federal laws do, you have to abide by the state law. Okay, if the federal law provides greater protection than your state law, you have to go by federal law. It is what it is, okay? Basically, just remember whichever law is going to benefit the employee the most, that's the one you have to abide by, okay? Again, not giving legal advice. You can check this out yourself. You can go to flsa.gov and check this out. You can speak to an attorney if you need to. But don't depend upon, especially if you're doing third-party outsourced payroll, don't depend upon them to get this all right. Ask them questions. Ask them, say, hey, I know this new law came in. How does it affect our church? Okay. So anyways, that's going to wrap up another episode, my friend. I do hope that the information was helpful to you, kind of explained. If you were having any questions, this is what our state law has. How does it affect me? Okay, check into those. But until next time, my friend, let's all strive to make an impact and not just an income. Take care, and remember to always look your best, do your best, and be your best. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye. Thanks so much for listening today. If you would like to help me keep this podcast going, please leave me a review. We're on your podcast platform there so others can find me. The reviews are what helps the podcast to go up in the ratings, which makes it more visible to others. So thank you again for listening, and be blessed, my friend. Bye-bye.